Hi, today we are going to talk about second readings of books, and I have selected a very interesting book over which I shall be sharing my experiences of reading the book for the second time. The name of the book is Black Obelisk, and it has been written by Eric Maria Remarque, who happens to be one of the most favorite authors of mine. This book was written by Remarque about Germany's inflation in the 1920s, early 1920s, about 3 or 4 years after this First World War. I have purposely selected this book because this book, the gap between the first reading and the second reading is about 30 years. So 30 years is a long time, and during that time I have also changed, and my thought process has also changed. So under the changed circumstances, reading of the book in two different times, what are the changes I have noticed? The first time I read the book was in the early 1980s. At that point of time, I was a young man in my 20s and was just being introduced to literature, and that to European literature. Since Remarque was writing in German, I had to go for a translation, and like many of the translated Remarque books available at those periods, the Black Obelisk was also a Bengali translation. You would all be aware that translated books sometimes do not bring out the true essence and flavor of the book. However, the Bengali translations available in those days were pretty good. My thought of reading the book was, at that point of time in my life, like getting a one-upmanship on literature over my friends, because I was reading European literature while they were not reading European literature at that point of time. And also, since I was a young person, I thought that I was knowing everything about everything, but the fact remains that my knowledge at that point of time on literature and many other things were very limited. So with my limited knowledge, when I read that book, I liked that book tremendously. I liked the atmosphere, the environment, what Remarque has elaborated in that book. The book is about a soldier who had participated in the trenches of the First World War, and after the war he has returned to his native town, which happens to be a provincial town in Germany. Since in those days there were major inflation, he has to struggle to make both ends meet. He works for one of his wartime friends, and the business in which he works is making and selling of gravestones. Of course, there is an obelisk in the courtyard of the business, which was purchased by the present owner's father, but in the 50 years it was lying there, it could not be sold. The book gave me an insight into that German period, the turbulent German period of the 1920s, and it talked about the characters in the books who had participated in the war. During those days, me being a First World War enthusiast, I thought that there would be more of First World War there, but unfortunately it was not like that. The book ended with a note of the hero going away from that small town for greater things in Germany, in the capital of Germany, in Berlin, and after that, after about a gap of 10 years, he comes back to the city and finds things have changed. My first impression of reading the book in the early 80s was that it was a nice book, but to tell you that at that point of time I was not able to fully comprehend the idea that Remarque was trying to convey to the readers. The second reading of the book happened about 32 years later. At that point of time, much water has passed, and I could not consider myself to be a callow young man anymore. I was a middle-aged person with more in-depth study of literature over that 30 years period, and I was very curious to read and understand Black Obelisk after that long gap. The second reading of Black Obelisk happened in a PDF format, which was actually uploaded in the internet by our Bangladeshi friends. I downloaded the PDF version and read through it, and I was trying to compare and comprehend the differences in my first reading and the second reading. What I understand in the second reading is much different than in my first reading. What I see in Black Obelisk's second reading is that the hero or main protagonist Ludwig is a typical Remarque hero who had spent his time in the trenches, who has seen death at close quarters, and have picked up friendship with other comrades in the front. These friendships have continued even after the war, and these friendships are very easy and very simple friendships, because both the friends, or if there are more friends, they have seen death at close quarters, and they know that that life can end at any point of time, and they don't seem to take things too seriously. In fact, what I realized by reading Black Obelisk second time was that most of the Remarque heroes, whether it is Paul Baumer of All Quiet, or Ernst of Roadback, or Robert Locump of Three Comrades, are similarly molded with Ludwig of the Black Obelisk. My understanding after reading the book is that through these heroes, Remarque has tried to portray his own character in the field of literature. The heroes are all actually people with a simple philosophy, and they want to live life fully. That is because they have seen death at close quarters, and they are very apprehensive that good times may not last. The ending of the book, which I read for the second time, is a little bit abrupt, and it is little bit different from the first translation which I read in the 80s. The book ended a little bit abruptly without much details. I think the second one is an abridged edition. However, what I could realize after the second reading is that Remarque has been a restless person who, having lived through the terrible times in the trenches, have always found society to be little overawing, and it has been found difficult by all these heroes to adjust to the accepted norms of the society. The hero in both the readings which I remember, hero comes back to the place after a gap of 10 years and finds everything has changed. This one made me realize that there are two things in life which can be termed inevitable. One is change, the other one is death. This philosophy of Remarque was ingrained to me by the second reading more firmly than in the first reading. I would sincerely request all of you to read books more than once and preferably in different ages. So this will give us different perspectives and different maturity levels and make our assessment of books different at different ages. And in case if any of you would like to read The Black Obelisk, I would be very happy if after reading you would share your thoughts on the book, so that we can, if required, we can discuss further on it. Thank you all for patiently listening to me, and we'll see you soon.